Another example I want to ask you about is Target. You just mentioned it briefly, but you've done a lot of writing for us on the subject of Satanism and the occult. We've covered it here on the podcast. Now it seems that the Minnesota corporation Target is offending people on both the fronts of the pride emphasis as well as Satanism. So help us understand what the big brouhaha was with Target and their pride display. Now, I did go into Target looking for the pride display. It was there at my local Target, except for it was, I don't know if it was more prominent at the front of the store in other places, but at my store, it was kind of in the back. I thought they might have even taken it down, but it was actually in the women's athletics section is where they placed it, complete with journals for being queer. They also had clothing items for girls as young or children as young as 5 in 5 toddler sizing. And they had a whole bunch of different queer related baking products and all different kinds of things in the athletic women's workout area. But I did not see any of these other products supposedly associated with Satanism. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So Target, leading up to Pride Month, which this year you have perhaps the strongest developing swell in this brand of capitalism, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure. That it's I'm trying to figure out how much to say here, but prepping for Pride Month in hopes of expanding their brand, basically their grade that they would get as a brand for higher level corporate type customers. They have this strong LGBT emphasis display that was more T than LGB, if that makes sense, because they started having a lot of cross-dresser and trans-identified friendly clothing. So tuck friendly women's outfit. So women's swimwear that was made so that if you don't have female genitalia, but you've got male genitalia, but you want to wear female swimsuits, they were marketing tuck friendly swimsuits so that you can reorient yourself down there and still fit as a man, even though you've got different genitalia. And Target's been doing this kind of things more subtly for many years now. I myself began boycotting Target right around the Obergefell decision in 2014, because that was the growing debate about bathrooms. And Target was coming down on the side of you can go into whatever bathroom you identify as. And I looked at that and said, that's a huge disservice to women and children. And I can't support that. And I stopped rolling with Target back then. And it's a soft boycott. I've shopped there maybe twice in the last 10 years. So I wasn't surprised that Target was going to have a bigger pride emphasis this year, because all the signs were saying, prepare for this month. It's going to be the biggest rainbow fest you've ever seen this month in June, which is Pride Month. Well, sure enough, they didn't disappoint. They had this huge LGBT display that was much stronger, not just on gay and lesbian, and bi, but on trans identification, which is a lot of lesbian, gay, and bisexual people who aren't part of that train. They don't support all the trans activism that's if in their view is starting to kind of take over LGBT. Well, they didn't just do LGBT. They didn't just have a lot of rainbows, but they were marketing to kids. And that was especially offensive to a lot of customers. So people that hadn't been following Target for the last 10 years were surprised to see this huge display that was intentionally set up in the front of the stores and was put there at first to be as prominent and flag waving, pride oriented as possible to win that kind of social credit for it. But they didn't they didn't anticipate the degree of pushback they would get. Because a lot of their customers are moderates and conservatives, or liberals who are like, well, keep it to yourself. And so they got a lot of pushback, and a lot of conservatives were swearing to boycott the place. Well, Target responded with a meeting within the first week of putting up those pride displays. They had an official meeting, and it was declared. It wasn't deliberated. It was declared you're to take these displays down in many areas, and then the areas that they stay up. I don't know if they left any up front, but for those that they let stay in place, they moved them to the back of the store so they wouldn't be in such a prominent place, wouldn't be in an eye-catching location that's going to attract parents and kids just because they happen to enter the store and couldn't miss it. Now you have to go searching for it a little bit. But that's where Target was after that first meeting. Well, of course, by changing their stance on it, they got a lot of blowback from the progressive left, the radical left wing. And so they started getting boycotted. And so the delightful irony is that Target was getting boycotted for offending conservatives and strong liberals alike because they didn't pick a stance. Well, as folks were digging into this story, because it was just rife with all sorts of headlines, it was just a really interesting dumpster fire, you might say. Well, as they dug into it, they realized that to come up with these displays and to come up with some of the items that they were selling, they partnered with a gay and queer designer named Eric Carnell. When I use the word queer, that used to be a term of derision. That's instead become a term that much of the LGBTQ have adopted themselves to mean not binary. Gender queer means you don't identify as male or female, you're queer. Or sexually queer would be I don't identify as gay or straight. I'm undecided. I'm queer. So this gay queer designer, Eric Carnell, he had been running, I believe, their Instagram account for almost a year, or at least contributing to their Instagram account for a year. And he designed a lot of the products that they provided. And when folks dug into this, they realized this guy has all the markings of the satanic temple kind of Satanism. He had references to Satan, to pentagrams, to Ouija boards, witchcraft, and militant activism about this LGBT lifestyle. Those are all themes worked within his design line called abprolin.co. I believe he's based in London, England, but abprolin.co. And if you go there, which I don't encourage you to, but if you were to go there, you'll see a lot of very disturbing pink and purple themed imagery talking about how Satan loves gay people, witches are for the LGBT, and you'll see backgrounds with Ouija boards and pentagrams, not to mention all the aggressive militant activism that has come into fashion in the last 2-3 years regarding LGBT. So that's the connection to the Satanic Temple. I couldn't find any formal statement by Eric Carnell identifying himself as a Satanist, but he has the markings consistent with it for whatever that's worth. So I'm not saying he is a Satanist, but a lot of the messaging he puts forward is consistent with that. And the CEO of Target, Brian Cornell, seems like he hasn't learned his lesson at all. At least since this quote as of May 23rd, he said, "I think these corporations are just good business decisions, and it's the right thing for society, and it's the great thing for our brand." He also says, "I know that focus on diversity and inclusion and equity has fueled much of our growth over the last 9 years." And if you think about it, 9 years ago would have put them just after the Obergefell decision, which was the big gay marriage decision in the Supreme Court. And back then, people were saying, if you allow gay marriage, you're stepping onto a slippery slope that's going to end up with a lot of more complicated, messier, uglier things. And that's exactly where we've rolled down to in recent times. But Target was trying to get on, in their view, the right side of history and support LGBT and LGBT activism early on. And that's where they're at now.
Don't miss out on getting your own copy of a very special double issue of our last print issue of the Christian Research Journal. It's a collector edition, and the last one before the journal morphs into an exclusively online magazine. And this is an issue that is covering the relentless daily drumbeat of social activism, which is opposing a Christian ethic and bombarding our culture with daily messaging.
John's article, How to Keep Your Job Without Losing Your Soul, a survival guide for diversity training, is only in this special issue. To receive this collector's edition and read his article, please go to equip.org. With your partner and gift in June to the Christian Research Institute, you will get this collector's edition right to your door.